So many of you know Chris. He's an avid striped bass fisherman. He's been fishing striped bass for about 30 years, since he was a young kid. 20 years, I'm sorry, 20 years. He keeps his boat on the club. He's got a 19-foot North Coast. So if you guys are out there, you see him fishing, the name of his boat is Over the Rail. Watch him, he's very good. I know Jimmy specifically asked for some tips on bridge fishing, because last Sunday Jimmy was fishing next to him at the bridge at night. Jimmy had a problem, he wasn't getting anything. He looked over at Chris. Chris was nonstop pulling up striped bass.
Except I didn't know it was Chris.
So he found out after it was Chris.
If we knew it was him, we would have went over there and mugged him. We found out after. But he was pulling them up, and we were catching the bottom.
I try to mug him, it doesn't work. I fish right next to him, I can't get shit.
So Chris is going to talk about targeting striped bass using light tackle and artificial lures, mostly oceanside. He is going to talk a little bit about the bay at the end. If you have questions, please save your questions for the end on the bridges. But if you have anything about oceanside, he's specifically going to talk about flutter spoons, jigs, plugs like topwater plugs, and salt plastics. And that's mainly what he came prepared to talk about. But again, because everybody was asking about the bridges, he's going to save your questions to the end. He will give you some tips about the bridges. So please, without further ado, welcome our speaker, Chris Lombardo.
All right, we're ready. First, I just want to say thanks. You know, I appreciate the opportunity to talk for you guys. It's an honor that they chose me to speak.
Happy birthday later. Motherfucker.
Well, no, this is a recording microphone. This isn't. All right, so he already did the introduction, so I'm just going to jump right into it. So we're going to talk about some tactics using light tackle for the bass full run, the upcoming bass full run. And this is stuff additional to what... No sweat. So this is like, I know a lot of people, there is no mic. There is no mic. So you just got to use your ears. Yeah. Guys, I can't speak too loud, so if you're quieter, you'll be able to hear. All right, so we're going to talk about some methods, light tackle methods, to complement what you already know about bass fishing on the full run outside in the ocean, which should be starting any day now. Last year it started pretty early, as opposed to previous years. We had to wait till like Halloweenish, but the last 2 seasons it's been kind of jumping off pretty early. So my goal fishing when I go out is to catch a lot of fish. I'm not on the hunt for like a trophy fish, the 50-pounder, the 40-pounder. You know, those come up. I enjoy that, but I like to be prepared to go out to catch a lot of fish. The more time I spend turning a handle on a reel than turning the wheel on the boat, the better. You know, if it's 10-pound fish, if it's 15-pound fish, slot size fish, as long as we get into a good amount of fish and everyone's reeling in fish, it's a good day. So that's where this stuff comes in. That's, you know, this is just more tactics to make you more successful out there. All right, so I start off with the setup the night before we're going out. You know, we're heading out, let's say we're heading out 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. We're getting our trolling gear ready because a lot of people still like to do the trolling and the live bait, bunker fishing. So we're not leaving that out. I'm not saying abandon those methods and do this stuff. I go prepared to do it all. So I didn't bring it all with me tonight because you've seen that stuff already. So we got our trolling rods, we got our live bait rods, you know, for snag and bunker and whatnot. But then we also have all this stuff. Now, this stuff is everything I bring to fish these items right here. So we have light spinning rods, we have medium spinning rods, we got heavy spinning rods, and we got a jigging conventional for use with the flutter spoons. Then we have some large profile plugs along with the spoons. We have some small paddle tail soft plastics, small bucktail, and small profile jigs. And if you notice, we go from small to big. And that's because there's different bait profiles. And does anyone know what I'm talking about when I say profile?
Sand eels, dipping in bunker, things like that.
Correct. So we're talking about different types of bait. So when you're going to pitch a lure to fish, you got to, what's the old saying? Match the hatch. Match the hatch. So that's why we have all these different size plugs and jigs and whatnot. But what a lot of people don't take into consideration is the rod and reel and line have to match the lure. So yeah, you could have the right size lure to present to the fish that are on small profile bait, but you can't throw. This is a 35 gram jig. It's probably equivalent to less than 1.25 ounces. You're not going to throw this little jig on a heavy spinning rod with 40-pound line and 40-pound leader on it. This line has enough buoyancy to keep this jig up. It'll never get down. So that's why, unfortunately, you got to bring so many friggin' rods on the boat. And so I have, like he said, I have a 19-foot center console, and getting all this stuff onto that boat is like a nightmare. Like the boat looks like a pincushion when I'm leaving. There's this rod sticking out everywhere.
Times that with 4 people.
Right, and then you invite somebody to come. You know, I usually fish with one other guy. Another guy comes with me, and he brings all this shit too. So now it's like it's mayhem on the boat with all these rods. But I've come up with like some pretty crafty ways of stashing rods on the boat. Oh, one important thing I want to mention. So I hear a lot from people, especially after the last 2 years when we had this, we've had an incredible large amount of bunker on the outside the last 2 seasons. So we've had a great bunker bite the last 2 seasons. So I hear people say, "Oh, it's going to be a bunker bite this year," as if that's the only bait out there. But that's not always the case. Like different baits can be here at the same time. It's not like just because the bunker here, the sand eels aren't here. Because years ago, when there wasn't that much bunker, there was good sand eel bite. People would go out jigging, especially out by like Fire Island. There was like really good jig bites. But that still goes on, but everyone's preoccupied fishing the bunker in close. So I'll give you an example. Last year, I was fishing over by the steps. There was a huge amount of bunker. There was a gigantic fleet of boats on it. And everyone's in there snagging bunker, flutter spooning and whatnot. And the bite just kind of shut down. There was just so many. I mean, I don't know if it was because of the amount of boats there, but the bite shut down. And there was a ton of boats, no bent rods. And I was like, let me just get out of here. I'm prepared with my stuff. I ran out to like 40, 50 feet of water. And I just started running around looking for birds. Find birds, there's fish boiling underneath it, and we're by ourselves and we're throwing poppers, we're throwing small jigs. We had a blast. So don't be afraid to look for alternative bait sources. They're out there. There's the rain bait, the sand eels, that's going to be going on out there. So don't get preoccupied with the bunker. People get fixated on the bunker, I got to fish the bunker. You don't always have to fish the bunker. One of the things I skipped over, which I just realized, is when you're riding out of the inlet, most people, a lot of people's, I've made this mistake before. My friend was out the day before, and he said he was fishing the bunker or he was trolling in 60 feet off the steps. So I'm gonna go out the inlet. I'm gonna hang a right. I'm going west. I'm going where my friend was yesterday. I'm ignoring everything on the water that I see. I see gannets diving. I see birds working, but I'm going to the report. Screw the report, use your eyes. Another mistake I made is a lot of times you're going out the inlet and you just see birds all over the place. But you're prepared to go the distance. You want to go west. You want to go west of Debs where everyone was catching the fish, and you just drove over the fish. There's so many times where I've ignored all those birds. like kind of inside the head buoy or just a little bit east off the east jetty. There's always like birds diving over there, and I've kind of always chalked it off to like bluefish, but that's bass. You know, I've stopped on. You know, I started stopping on everything I see now, and there's a lot of bait in the fall, especially on an outgoing tide that's getting swept out of the inlet. Right now, because I've been fishing at night in the bays, I've been seeing a lot of different baits. We have peanut bunker, we got spearing. I've been seeing finger mullets, shad. There's a ton of bait in the bay right now, and that stuff's going to be pushing out. So that, you know, that could create like a really good bite right in front of the inlet. So what I'm trying to say is, don't drive past stuff. You know, use your gut. You know, if you're out there and you see something, you see gannets diving, you see birds working, don't assume anything. Go fish it. Go up, you know, run up to it, throw a plug, throw a jig, and see what it is instead of driving past it. You know, it's I've done it. We do ourselves an injustice by chasing a report rather than going fishing everything we see. I'll go into the tactics with this stuff. So we'll start with the big stuff. So we'll start on this end. This is larger profile lures. What does this look like? You know, out of all the bait sources we have, what do we think this resembles? All this bigger stuff. This is bunker profile. So these Flutter Spoons, so I got introduced to these a couple years ago. I think it was 2017. Jordan, my friend Jordan started bringing these on the boat, and we're fishing pods, and he was telling me how guys in Jersey, you know, mainly in Raritan Bay, were using this lure, jigging in Raritan Bay to catch bass. I used it like a whole bunch of times in and around pods. I never caught a fish on it. So what I started doing was, when I was snagging bunker and fishing the pods, I would throw that on my jigging rod, and I would dead stick it in the back of the boat. You know, because I have a 19-foot boat out in the ocean, that thing's rocking. So I put this thing in what the tuna guys call auto jig. So that's in the back of the boat, and we're snagging bunkers, and we're waiting for a bite, and all of a sudden I just hear a reel screaming, and I'm like, and I forgot about this in the back of the boat. I'm like, what is that noise? My engine's making a weird fucking sound. And I look back, and this thing's just bent over, and I ran to it, picked it up, and that's the first fish I ever caught on this. And I was like, wow, that's pretty interesting. I wasn't really even doing much. You know, I didn't have it in my hands. I wasn't jigging it or anything, but it caught a fish. And I started doing that ever since. Anytime I'm fishing bunker pods, I put one of these in auto jig in the back. So that's one way to use it. It's not the right way to use it, but that's how I started off using it. In the past couple of years, with these humongous pods, sometimes the fish aren't in the pods, and what I've noticed was, I'm running the boat at low speed from one pod to the next pod in like 20, 30 feet of water, and I'm marking the crap out of fish. I'm like, these fish, like for example, say if there was a bunker pod in 20 feet off the steps, and then you see another one like maybe a quarter mile away. There might be fish stacked up in between those pods, and that's the best opportunity to use this, because there's not a thick amount of bunker around it. Those fish are inshore, they're keyed in on bunker because that's where they're staged up. They're in the 20, 30 foot depths where the bunker is, so that's where you want to use this. So they're pretty easy to do.
Now, Chris, quick question for you.
Yeah.
Now you get different colors. Obviously, you have.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up.
I have a silver one that I've definitely had more.
All right, guys. He asked about the colors. That's very important. Have you ever noticed when you're out in 50, 60 feet of water, the water's green, and then you go into 20 or 30 feet of water, what color's the water? turns brown. Now the conventional ones that I've always fished were these chrome ones. And the chrome is beautiful in green water, but in brown water, I don't even think they could see this. So when I started getting these painted ones, the green and white, these work better in that brown water. It's more visible in that brown water. That's a very good point you brought up. These, you're letting them to the bottom. When they hit the bottom, you maybe go like a crank or two up. You sweep it up, and then let the line go slack. So what this thing does, it flutters and it seesaws, flashes around. And 9 out of 10 times, they'll get it on the fall. That's when they strike it. And you won't even know till you go back up, and the weight's there. Then you crank down tight on them. And like I said, 9 out of 10 times it's on the fall. You want to fish a little lighter on the drag than you normally would, because you're dealing with a single treble, and you pull a lot of hooks in the fish with these. You'll hook up a lot, but especially if you're vertical right at the boat and you're straight up and down on them, if you have a high amount of drag on the reel, it's really easy to pull a hook out of the bass's mouth. I've had those things come rocketing out of the water and almost hit me in the head, because the fish is like 2 feet below the surface, and then the hook pulls and the thing comes out like a missile. So be careful with those. Any other questions? I'm not rushing. Is there any other questions about the flutter spoons? Yeah, there's heavier ones, there's bigger ones. Correct. One of the other things I want to mention is I typically only fish these in like 20, 30 feet of water. The reason being is the way this gets to the bottom and the way it works is, like I said before, it seesaws and goes down. If you're out in 60 feet of water and you're marking fish down there, by the time this thing seesaws to the bottom and you're drifting at a knot, you're not going to, it's highly unlikely, unless there's a huge mass of fish there, it's very unlikely you'll get it to the bottom before the boat drifts away. So this is 20, 30 feet in and around bunker pods. Works very well. If you're fortunate enough to have those fish in and around the bunker pods come up and they're feeding on the surface, that's when we move on to these big profile plugs that are bunker profile. I don't even know how much they weigh. I can't see it being over 3 ounces. So, all right, we're still in those 20, 30 foot depths, and we're fishing in and around bunker. Now we have fish breaking on the surface around pods. So if you're conventional fishing in that scenario, people snagging bunkers. If the fish are up at the surface and you have a bunker snagged, or you have a live line bunker out, you're kind of fishing beneath them at that point. So you probably want to throw something top water. Now this is what's commonly referred to as a spook or a dock. These work really, really well. If you never used one of these before, this kind of has a similar action to a pencil popper, where it kind of darts back and forth like this. So you would fish this like a pencil popper, and they're pretty effective. I really like fishing metal lip swimmers, because where this is on top, this is a kind of subsurface, like maybe a few inches below the surface. So you could, even if there's fish maybe a foot or two below the surface, they'll see this as well. I've used this in scenarios where this was working better than this. I was drawing a lot of strikes with the metal lip swimmer.
Chris, can you just show the action like on the spook? Is it like a side-to-side action?
Yeah, it's kind of like a walk the dog,
with the pole
type action.
Yeah, with the rod.
How you work it?
Yeah.
So typical pencil popper, I come from a little bit of a surf fishing background, but most people, when they're working a pencil popper, they have, usually a much longer reel than this. Let me get a longer rod. So on a pencil popper, you'd cast your popper out, you'd have the butter on the rod on your knee, and you'd get the tip going like that. up and down, up and down. So the tip's flexing out like that, and that causes that thing to jump around, and it naturally goes side to side. I find that.
Chris, could you do the tip in here? Just do that again. Okay.
Just up and down. I mean, this isn't a light enough action rod to get it going real good, but on a like a 7 to 8 foot plug-in rod, you know, that tip would be going like this. So what I do on the boat, because when you're fishing from shore, you're pretty much, your line is parallel to the water, so that works real well doing that way. What I do is, say if I'm on the bow of the boat, I'll be standing on the bow of the boat. I fish downwards like this. So my cadence is, I do like a slow cadence, and I'm just snapping the rod tip down. And that keeps pop, and also I fish poppers like that too. I'll go over this real fast. If you're fishing up, you're just going to snap that popper out of the water. It's going to be jumping around. You're not going to keep it in the water. But if you're fishing downward, it pulls the plug into the water, so you're not skipping it off the top of waves. So a popper cadence, like a standard popper, would just be like, you cast, you come tight on your plug so you have no slack, and then you do a couple reels, pop. Couple reels, pop.
And is the objective like you want a splash?
You want a nice splash and a pause. A nice splash and a pause on a popper.
I guess the top of the lure is shaped like that.
Correct. I see a lot of people fishing poppers like this. They're going real fast. Pop, 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 pop. That's incorrect. You fish a popper like this. Slow roll, pop. Slow roll, pop. Slow roll, pop. And 9 out of 10 times the fish hits, he just devours it on the pause. If the fish is trailing it, when you pop and then pause, that's his opportunity to crush that lure. The pencil popper is a little bit different, and it's more of like a real hectic commotion, like so. Your speed is relatively slow, but you're jigging kind of really fast to keep that thing splashing back and forth, back and forth. This has the dock has a similar motion, that side to side motion, but it's not splashing. It's just kind of cruising the water surface like that.
And how do you create that action with the rod? Like, is it...
Pencil popper motion. You're going, but a little bit.
Creating the splash, you're kind of creating the same effect.
Well, no, the dock.
It's kind of going under, a little bit wilted, and he's getting ready to die, so that's why you're kind of creating that.
I mean, whatever they think that is, they think it is. Yeah.
Floundering a little bit.
It's bait in distress on the surface. Whatever they think it is, that's fine. I don't really care what they think it is, as long as they eat it. Swimmers. Okay. This is one of my favorite lures to bring out with me, because this thing is like multi-purpose. I think this is a great little jig. Shimano makes this. It's called the Colt Sniper. They make it in sizes up to like 180 grams. This is a 35 gram. This is like a 60. This is an 80 gram, and this is a 60 gram. Now the nice thing about this jig is it swims. It's not just a vertical jig. So if you're out there and you see fish breaking the surface, usually I'll have one guy, say if I'm fishing with one of my friends on the boat, I'll be like, you have a popper tied on, I'm gonna tie on one of these. Because you don't wanna pull up to a feed and have everyone on the boat throwing the same thing. You don't know what's gonna work ideally in that scenario. So maybe I'll have one of these tied on, and my friend who's fishing with me, he'll have a popper on. So I'll fire out one of these small jigs. These aren't that heavy, they don't really get down that deep. So if you just cast it out, let it hit the water, and just start burning it in like this, I don't know if has anyone ever fished for albies before? The cadence for albies, where you give it a couple reels, pull, give it a couple reels, pull, give it a couple reels, pull, like quickly. that's how you fish these when you're fishing them parallel to the water surface. And they'll stay pretty high up in the water column. So even if those fish are up high, they'll see this and hit this. But the nice thing about these is sometimes the fish get spooked because you're there and they go down. And now the surface feed that you just pulled on is gone. And you're like, shit. So you look at your machine and you're like, oh, wow, look, they're down. They're like mid-water column. Open the bail, and that thing sinks straight down like a vertical jig. And now you're vertical jigging. So this is like a dual purpose jig. It's a vertical jig and it's retrievable. It swims like a swimming lure. So that's a great thing, because now you're in a scenario where fish were at the surface, now they went down. Now instead of retying, like, oh shit, now I gotta put a vertical jig on, you already have it on. So you have a dual purpose lure right there that can kind of change things up. Has anyone ever been in a scenario where the bass are on that rain bait, that real low, like, people call it rain bait. I don't know if that's the right term. I think other people call it bay anchovies. It's like a really small, it looks almost like a spearing, but it's real small. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Yeah. No, I was actually able to get a good look at them this summer when those green bonitas were around. And I was heading out to like the middle grounds to go fluke fishing, and there was green bonitas blowing up everywhere, and they were airing out. And right in front of them, I saw all these little tiny baits come flying out of the water. I even saw like their eyes. They were so small. But has anyone ever pulled up on striped bass feeding on that little stuff and thrown the book, everything on the boat on it, and not getting the bite? Has that happened to anyone? Yep. So in that scenario, this small stuff really works. Little 30-gram jigs, small profile bucktails, small swim shads on like a half-ounce jig head. Now, I want to get into how this relates to the gear. So this rod is like a 7-foot medium, like 30 to 50 pound rod. Doesn't give a line rating. It's rated at 15 to 30 pounds, 7 foot. This is what I use, and it's a 3500 class reel, but that's in Daiwa. Like, with spinning reels, like the manufacturers are messed up. Like these reels look almost the same size. In Shimano, this is a 6000, and in Daiwa, that's a 3500. So when you're going to pick out a reel, or if you're going to order something online, just remember that certain, especially Shimano to Daiwa, Daiwa's giving you a much bigger reel at that reel class. So a 3500 Daiwa is the size of like a Shimano 6000 almost. So take that into consideration if you're ordering.
Chris, can you just briefly talk about power and action? So when people are shopping for reels, they want, I guess, fast action, medium power?
That's actually like a really big subject to get into. So I'll touch on it briefly. Like fast action, when they talk about a blank being fast, like how a blank is built, it's tapered. From a distance, it just looks like a rod, like a cylinder. It's not a cylinder. It's half-inch diameter on this end, but it'll go down to 3/32 diameter on this end. Now, the rate of that taper is going to determine the power and the action of the rod. So if it's really wide back here and really thin up here, that means that the rod is going to be nice and flexible in the tip, but then once you bend deep down into the blank, it's going to shut down and give you that power to fight the fish. So that gives the rod the ability to work plugs and lures properly how you want them, but also be able to fight the fish. So that's where the term fast action comes from. So a fast action rod shuts down in the upper third of the rod. So like, you see how if I pull it, watch, you hold on to the tip. You see how the bend it's in like the forward third of the rod. If this was an old style rod that's not fast action, this rod would be bent almost like Like a bridge. Yeah, they call that parabolic. So fast action rods are really good for working plugs and lures and stuff because you have that light tip which allows you to work the lure and the jig, but you also have the power to fight the fish.
Right. So pretty much all these rods are fast action.
Most new rods, especially when it comes to spin gear and jigging rods, would be considered like a fast action rod, except for like a slow pitch rod, which none of these rods are really slow pitch rods. Slow pitch is a totally different thing altogether, and it doesn't necessarily describe the rod. It's more of the method, and the rod is designed around that method. So when people say, oh, it's a slow pitch rod, it's not talking about a specific action of the rod. It's talking about a specific method of fishing, and the rod's designed for that method, which just happens to be like a really soft parabolic rod, which might work really well. I haven't tried it. You know, this is a jigging blank that I use for the flutter spoons, but as far as all these methods, the closest thing to slow pitch jigging would probably be the flutter spoon, because that's what a slow pitch jig does. Flutters down. So a slow pitch rod might work. I know people who use slow pitch rods with these because it's a pretty close action. Getting back to the gear. The gear has got to match the lures that you're presenting. So this is the lightest rod I have here. This is a 2000 size reel on a really little St. Croix rod. I think this is rated at 6 to 12 pounds, 1/4 ounce to 5/8 ounce. This is what I use for, has everyone heard the term snap jigging? So snap jigging is, got it. Snap jigging is a method that a man in Montauk out of Westlake, John Paduano, I don't know if he pioneered it or if he just made it real popular, but he, I learned this from him. I talked to him at a couple of the fishing shows, and then one time I was at Westlake fishing on a friend's boat. We ran into him in the dock, and I picked his brain about this, and I started employing this in the bay around the bridges, and it was really effective. So what the method is, this is his bucktails. If you go on his Instagram page, he's called Fish'em Light. Yeah, they're very expensive, and if there's bluefish around, I'd lock these in a safe. I don't want these anywhere near them, because I've lost a few of these to bluefish. I've lost a few of them in the bridges. I go to that, what's that show out east? The Ward Melville. Every year over the winter, I go to Ward Melville and I buy like 20 of these from him, and I pick his brain. So this method is kind of interesting. You're throwing this bucktail out, and you're letting it sink. You're watching the line as you know it's pretty much slack, and then when it gets to the end of the descent, you snap it up real hard. Then you let it sink. Then you snap it up real hard. But you're doing a slow roll too, because you don't want to snap it up and down in the same place. So you're reeling in a couple cranks, snap it up, let it fall. Snap it up, let it fall. And just like in the flutter spooning scenario, 9 out of 10 times they pick it up on the fall. And there's been times where I'm fishing paddle tails, other soft plastics, and I'm not getting bites, but I'll get the bites on this. I don't know why. I think it causes some kind of instinctual reaction to the fish, like the fish aren't on a feed per se, but it kind of just, it jolts them. It's like primal, like they just react and hit it. So it's pretty effective. I don't do it much in the ocean. I have done it in the ocean, especially around that scenario where there's that rain bait around and they're not hitting anything else. This worked for me.
Chris, just one question on that. When you're snap jigging, what's the max line you want? I've heard on that you want a very light line.
You do. I'm glad you brought that up. A lot of this lighter gear, especially the stuff when I'm fishing with these light jigs and the light soft plastics, I'm fishing 10-pound line. Now, this bucktail and this jig and this paddle tail aren't heavy enough. If I were to tie this on to this setup, which has 30-pound braid and a 40-pound leader, that leader and line, if I cast, say, 60 feet out, that's enough buoyancy to keep this thing up in the water column. It's going to be very difficult with that much heavy line, which is buoyant, especially the mono. This is not really going to sink well with all that line parallel on the water coming down. So that's why when we're fishing lighter rods, so we could feel, you know, these are small things. You know, you probably wouldn't, if you put that jig on this rod, you probably wouldn't even feel it. So that's why we use the lighter stuff with the lighter line. You know, when I have one of these on, tied onto this, and I'm snapping up, I can feel everything. You know, light line cuts through the water easily, gets down, and you have the ability to get such small profile lures down into the water column where the fish are.
Chris?
Yeah.
So you took a snap jig. Can you snap jig with the soft plastics too?
You can. Okay. Yeah. So that's another thing I've done, where you take something you learn from somebody else and you mix it into what you already know. Because I fish soft plastics a lot in the bay for stuff, and you know, you could, especially with, where do I got them? Oh, the bucket. I forgot to go over the bucket. Real quick. So the night, remember when I said the night before when I'm tying up, I got my rod with the popper, I got my rod with the small profile jig or plastic on it, the flutter spoon. Everything I want to fish, poppers, flutter spoons, jigs, goes into this bucket. And this is on the deck of the boat when I go out. And the trolling stuff, the rods are up there. The mojos and everything, spoons are down in the bucket. So everything's I'm not rifling through the tackle center of my boat. Look, where's that popper? Where's that jig? Where's that bucktail? I have everything set up in these bins, hanging off the side of the bucket. So everything's ready to go. But these straight tail, so this is a 7-inch Bass Assassin. Here, I'll put it on a jig head. So I fish these a lot in the bays. 7-inch Bass Assassin on an 1.5 ounce jig head. You know, in the deep portions by the bridge where it's 30, 40 feet deep, those deep holes. So the guys who wanted to ask me about the bridge fishing, here's a little bit. I'm fishing bucktails, like 1.5 ounce, 2 ounce bucktails, and I'm fishing stuff like this. We're throwing this up tide, letting it get down into those deep holes, 30, 40 feet deep. And my previous methods that always worked, they still work really well, was just a light retrieve and small jigs off the bottom. Light retrieve, you know, kind of a slow roll and small jigs off the bottom. Sometimes I wasn't getting the bite, so I started doing that snap jig method that I learned from that gentleman, and I started snapping these off the bottom. So I would snap it up, reel, it sinks to the bottom, snap it up again, reel, sinks to the bottom, and it would trigger bites. So that's kind of adjusting, you're not changing the tactic, you're just adjusting the way you're fishing it to try to get bites. So that's basically an adjustment you can make to your fishing.
We were doing that, we were getting hung up a lot. We lost a lot of gear on the bottom. Should we have maybe come off the bottom a little bit, or no?
There's no trick or secret I could tell you to stop that from happening. It's just kind of par for the course for fishing and structure, because you know that's blackfish territory where we're fishing for bass.
Yeah.
So the way I get around it is I'm paying like super close attention, and when that thing hits the bottom, I'm getting it off the bottom, and when it's going near the bottom, I get it off the bottom.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to drag. You don't want any dragging. That's the worst. You just want to touch bottom. So you're going like say if my arm's the bottom, you're retrieving, hit bottom, boom, 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 you're not fluking, you're not dragging the bottom.
Okay. That's easier said than done.
No, so like I said, that's time on the water. That's going out there and throwing $1,000 worth of jig heads at the Big M, and just gaining the experience. It's not something I figured out in one day, and you know, I burned a lot of bucktail. I probably have. If I got all the jig heads and bucktails back from the Big M from the last 10 years, I could buy like a 28 regulator instead of my 19-foot boat. All right, let's open it up to questions. I think I hit just about all the things I wanted to hit.
Anybody got a question?
First, Chris, thanks. That was absolutely awesome. Really is. Your knowledge, I really appreciate that. You know, it's so maybe not even a fair question.
This guy's the real deal.
Yeah. Like I said, he'll be out there in the night, and he's calling to me. I'm seeing him, and I'm catching crap, and it pisses me off. So, but if you had all these outfits, one outfit, it's the only one you could have. Is there anyone? What would you take?
I would take the middle of the road outfit because it gives me, like, if I take the lightest one, then I can't fish anything kind of middle of the road, and if I take the heavy one, I wouldn't be able to fish the light stuff. So I'd probably take this one. This is like the middle, the middle size, because I have enough experience where I could probably fish the light stuff with this because I've thrown everything under the sun a million times.
Right.
So I would probably take, you know, like this 7-foot medium with like a 3500 on it, because you could probably cover everything with this.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Any other questions? All right. Well, if there's no more questions, Chris, I really appreciate it. That was an amazing
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you very much.
Again, if anybody sees Chris out on the water, his boat is, what's your boat again, Chris?
Over the rail.
Over the rail. You'll see him out there and watch him.
Get away from me.